Hey everyone, welcome to a new video, welcome to my channel, and as you can tell from the title of this video, I have another book haul for you. I haven't done one of these in a while. I think the last one I put up was in May when I showed you all the books that I bought during my trip to London, and it's almost the end of the year, and I'm about to complete my Goodreads reading challenge of reading 50 books in 2016, so I thought it was time for a treat. Plus there are also some more books that I bought I think in the past 4 or 5 months that I hadn't really shown yet, so I thought that I'd lump it all together and do one big, giant collective haul. If you would like to know what I bought, then please keep on watching. So I got all of these books from multiple places. Some of them are from some of my local bookstores. I live just one street over from the main shopping street where most of the bookstores are located in my town. So yeah, that definitely doesn't help. Plus I placed an online order because I find that if you're trying to find complete series, then it's better to go online because the English book selection in my bookstores is quite limited. So unless it's super duper new, they don't really tend to have everything anymore. But before we get to the novels, I thought I'd show you 2 non-fiction books that I got, and the first one is this one, and this is The Secret Library by Oliver Tearle, Tearle, I think. A book lover's journey through curiosities of history. So what this book does is that it takes you through history, but instead of using typical events in history, it goes through the history of literature. The second non-fiction book that I bought is this one. This is Face by Sam and Nic Chapman, otherwise known as Pixie Woo. You might know them from YouTube. And the minute that I found out that they did a book, I was like, I have to get that one. I'm just gonna go completely randomly through the rest of these books. The book I picked up that sounded really intriguing is Belgravia by Julian Fellows, and he is the author of and creator of Downton Abbey. So this is a historic fiction novel. There's a ball that happened and something happens at that ball, and it pretty much puts this entire status of a very well-off family pretty much at stake. Tends to paint a picture of the 1840s in London as well. So right at the beginning of the Victorian era, which is an era that I don't read much of. I mostly read late Victorian fiction. So I think this is a pretty interesting time period to know a little bit more of. Then I also picked up 2 books that are newly released this fall, I believe both of them came out. This is Empire of Storms, which is the 5th book in the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. That's a series that I started this year. I've been absolutely loving it, so I couldn't pass up on the 5th book in that series. And another series that I love and have been reading this year is the Lockwood & Co. series by Jonathan Stroud. This is a series I don't hear a lot of people talking about on YouTube, but I absolutely love this series. I just finished the 3rd book in the series, and this is the 4th one, The Creeping Shadows. And it's just an amazing series about ghost hunters and this alternate universe where ghosts are a problem, and you have a bunch of teenagers that try to fight this problem, and it's just very action-packed and incredibly thrilling reads that are very well written. I also picked up 2 vintage classics from one of the more cheaper bookstores in my town, so I think these were only €5 each. I picked up some Virginia Woolf. I've never actually read anything by her. This is The Waves, and out of the selection that they had by Virginia Woolf, this was the book that really intrigued me the most, and I thought it's not too big, so I hope this is a good way to become more acquainted or better acquainted with her work. And then the other book I picked up is by Angela Carter, and this is Night at the Circus. And I already picked up her book, The Magic Toy Shop, earlier this year, which I haven't read yet, but again, the premise of this sounds incredibly intriguing. Some other books that I picked up are complete series, and one of them is the complete, or at least so far completed, Jackaby series by William Ritter. This came up in my online shopping cart recommendations, hey, if you like this, you might like this as well, or possibly even on Goodreads. I'm not sure. So I know very little about this series apart from some of the blurbs that I read online. There are 3 books out in this series so far, which are Jackaby, Beastly Bones, and Ghostly Echoes, and this just sounds like a series that's right up my street. I have no clue yet whether I like this, but I know that once I do want to read the entire series, which is why I bought all 3. Another book in a series that I already read more of is The Harvestmen by Alex Grecian. This series started with The Yard, which is sort of like CSI but in Victorian London, because they do implement some like very early forensic material in here. I didn't really like the 3rd book in the series very much. The Devil's Workshop was a bit too cliched for me, but apparently this book focuses on one of the other characters that is introduced in the 3rd book, and I can't wait to read this, because I hope that this will be a bit more like the first 2 books in the series, which were absolutely great. I also spotted some new releases that I wanted to get, and one of them is The Muse by Jessie Burton. I've never read The Miniaturist by her, which I do have, but I just didn't get round to it. But when I saw this cover, I was like, I have to read it. I don't care what it's about, but that looks like one stunning read. I sometimes also just like picking up books that, you know, seem really, really cool and have a lot of buzz going around it, which I think this one definitely had, and just to see what it's all about. I picked up another historical fiction novel. This is The Last Days of Night by Graham Moore, and this has been getting quite a lot of good reviews. It's a historical fiction novel that is set again in the late 19th century, but it is based on real life people who lived around that time. It actually kind of fuses the story around these like big scientists of the day. So I believe it's like Alexander Bell, Nikola Tesla. Those are all featured in this book, and they are some of the main characters that are in here. Apparently the author of this book did a ton of research to really figure out how these characters would have interacted in real life, and that's what this book is pretty much about. It's about, I believe it's about introducing electricity in New York City. The next complete series that I picked up is The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. This is one series that I've heard so much about, and I was just like, I just need to get started on this. I read some of the blurbs. I'm not sure whether I like this, but yeah, it just sounds like a great read from what I've heard from it. And yeah, again, I'm not entirely sure what this is about, but because so many people are raving about it, I just can't wait to dig in. This book was recommended to me by one of my followers on my blog. This is The Girls by Emma Cline, which I believe is about a girl who's kind of like lonely, and then she sees these girls roaming around town, and they appear to be like members of some sect or something, and she decides to join them to have some sort of relationship with these people. And it's apparently a pretty sad book, but it is one of those books that has been getting quite a bit of buzz this year, and yeah, the follower said I would absolutely enjoy this, so since we seem to have quite a similar taste in books, I think I might like this. From this series, I was so intimidated just by the sheer size of these that I only picked up the first book in the series, and this is The Black Prism by Brent, which I believe is part of the Lightbringer series. I think that's what it's called. The 4th book has just recently been released, but as you can see, this thing is massive, and I'm not really one for like really hardcore fantasy yet. It's been one of my things on my to-do list to really try and read some hardcore fantasy, and since this really intrigued me when it comes to like the premise of this, apparently the magic system in this book is based around light, and if you use too much of it, then it also shortens your lifespan, which seems to be like a really interesting premise to be working with. So yeah, I was intrigued enough to pick up the first one, and if I like this, I will definitely get the other ones too. A series that I had on my bookshelves but that wasn't complete yet, I found out when I perused a different bookstore one day, is the Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. I picked up Stars Above, which is like an accompaniment or like a collection of short stories. Plus I also picked up Fairest, which is like Lunar Chronicles 3.5. I believe this goes in between the 3rd and the 4th book in the series. So I decided, since I hadn't started it yet, I was like, I'm much more enticed to read it if I have all the books there, and I think that's going to be one of my projects for 2017. A complete series that I now picked up is the Shatter Me series by Taherah Mafi. This is another one of those series that I just hear everybody on YouTube raving about. Apparently it's a bit of like a dystopian world, and this girl who's the main character, she kills people with just a touch, I believe. And one of the reasons why I was always like, should I buy this or not? I mean, check that out. That cover is just amazing. Also in the category of trying to complete series, I think this can definitely fall under that denominator, because I've been buying quite a few books this year that were written by Rick Riordan, mainly the Percy Jackson series. That's the one that I've been really into. I even read some of the like spin-offs, but I was also very much intrigued by the Norse series that he's been writing, which is Magnus Chase and the Sword of Summer, which is the first one, and Magnus Chase and the Hammer of Thor, and that was released just last fall, I think, again. So yeah, I picked these up to try and get into one of the other series by Rick Riordan. An author I've never actually read anything by is Alexandra Bracken. This is Passenger. This was raved about, I think, earlier in the year when it was first released, but I only found it recently at my local bookstore. And when I saw all of the reviews, I was like, yeah, it might be interesting. But then I read the blurb on the back and I was like, ooh, that's actually really, really interesting. I think it seems to involve some sort of time travel and pirates and all that. So it's set in New York City in the present day, it says here at the back, but also on a ship in the Atlantic in 1776. I'm not sure why, but it sounds intriguing, so I figured, why not give it a go? So one of the bookstores in my town has this like specialty of like not selling too much fantasy or like popular fiction, but is much more aimed at like literature, more literary fiction. And I spotted this book at that bookstore, and this is Andrew Michael Hurley's The Loney, or Loney, I think that's the way you should say it. And this just sounds like a book that's, I don't know, it sounds pretty mysterious and dark and bleak. It's apparently about two brothers, and one of them is mute and the other one tries to protect him. They go to this house year after year with their families. Somebody's murdered, and then the Loney starts playing a really big role in their lives. But what the Loney is, or how this exactly works, and what exactly happens is all pretty mysterious, even from reading the back. This book is The Strangler Vine by M.J. Carter, and I very accidentally picked up the second book in this series without knowing it was a series. That one's called The Printer's Coffin, and again, this seems to be like one of those Victorian detective stories. It says here, a dash of Sherlock, witty and entrancing historical thriller. This sounds like, again, something that's right up my street, so I couldn't pass this up. We're almost there. This is Leigh Bardugo's The Crooked Kingdom. I think I picked up the first book in this duology earlier this year in one of my other book hauls that I showed you. And yeah, that one's called Six of Crows, and this is the second book in that duology. To be quite honest with you, I've never actually read anything by Leigh Bardugo yet. I have the Grecian series as well as this duology now. So again, for 2017, I think it has to be one of my projects to start reading some Leigh Bardugo, because I now have all the books she's ever put out, I believe. And then last but not least, I have the Darkest Minds trilogy by Alexandra Bracken as well. And it's The Darkest Minds, Never Fade, and In the Afterlight. And again, this is just one of those book series that I have heard so many people rave about, so I thought it was time to add it to my shelves so that I can start reading this one too. So those are all the books that I bought in the past 4 to 5 months. Remember, I didn't buy all of this in one go. It's a bit crazy if I were to do that. But yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did, and please subscribe because I make new videos every single Sunday. I hope you have a great day. Bye.